Dawson Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here, and welcome to another Dawson's Top 5. This time is going to be Top 5 Worst Things About the Neo Saban Era. Obviously, we already did the best one and took a look at some of the, positive things to come out of it. But this is still probably my least favorite era overall. But, we're looking forward. But let's take a look at some of the worst things to come out of this era. In my opinion, again, all these Top 5 videos are my Top 5. I didn't run some sort of algorithm. I wouldn't even know how to do that, of like what's objectively the worst thing. But anyway, let's get started. So number 5 is the super seasons. Just like, see this? See it? Wait, that's the super seasons noise. No, but like this is, representing that. Actually, no, I don't hate Super Mega Force that much, but this was the closest thing for representing. But anyway, and when I say super seasons, I don't mean 2 seasons. That honestly doesn't bother me much. I know it's a huge deal to a lot of people because there's kind of a programming into fans that think it has to be 40 plus episodes to tell a Toku story, but I think it could be 10 episodes and it'd be fine. Anything is possible, but that's for another video. But I don't mind them having 2 seasons. My issue is with there's ways I would go about it differently for each season. I think you could do 2 seasons for some, 1 seasons for other. But my issue is with the naming of it. I think that was stupid. You know how every time we get new Sentai pictures, and then people immediately start speculating, like, what would the Power Rangers be called? And inevitably, like, one of the first names is, like, whatever the theme is, Force, like Kitchen Force, Dino Force, I'm coming up with weird things, Tool Force, Egg Force, whatever. Whatever the theme of the Sentai is, plus Force, is always, like, the placeholder name for people's theories. And imagine that, but if it were real. That's the way I see the super seasons, where it's like, every time we're like, hey, what's the second season going to be called? Super whatever Force, but it's like, that's real. That's really what happened. Every single season of all 4 series, Samurai, Mega Force, Dino Charge, and Ninja Steel, they used super. I think that was incredibly stupid, and I bet even the most casual of younger viewers caught on to how stupid that was. I get why they did it in the sense that for marketing, they wanted to create a way to generate excitement for the second year, especially with the toys. But I think they could have come up with at least one other name to use besides Super, Ultra, not Ultra, or something, or I've seen other shows do it. Both kids shows like Ben 10 and other shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. come up with like a secondary title, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Ghost Rider, or like Ben 10 was like Galactic Monsters. You could come up with a secondary title so you get that shiny new toy packaging, but you don't have to change the name of the team, especially when they gave us no reason or no real good reason why like Super Ninja Steel should just change their name because of it. They could have called like Dino Charge, Quest for the Dark Energem, or something like that. Just come up with something different, whether it's a secondary title or a different power-up team name. I think the fact that it was always Super was really stupid, and it kind of had forced this need to come up with why Super was in there, but then they didn't always necessarily pay it off in a meaningful way, and that just really bothered me. But there was aspects to it that other people hated that just didn't bother me as much, like the 2 seasons existing and the hiatus time in general. I was kind of fine with that, but the naming was just the worst thing. Okay. Number 4 is the music, and by that I mean the theme songs and the general background music of the show. I think it was the weakest without question for me. Everybody tends to love the original Saban era of, MMPR through In Space, when we had like actual lyric themes and stuff from Ron Wasserman. I prefer personally the Disney era. I loved how each season, specifically more so starting a little bit with SPD, where each score had its own unique vibe that very much fit with the tone and theme of that show. They still did use some like royalty-free stuff in there, but it was, point is Power Rangers was, I think I just spit there, sorry about that. Power Rangers was way more, I'm just so passionate about the scores, but it was much better scored from MMPR onwards until we got to Neo Saban. And for Neo Saban we had 2 things. We had basically MMPR remixes and then really generic forgettable music, and the generic forgettable music they used for every single year. I could pick out every now and then when I'd recognize a little bit that they use. I'm like, oh yeah, that's been around since Samurai. And the fact that each theme, even though Dino Charge and stuff was better, where they got a little bit more of their own identity, I still hated that they wanted every theme to basically be grafted onto the MMPR theme. I think it took away from each season building their own identity. And then the music too, where they basically had new versions of Bulk and Skull's theme, Rita's Palace theme, whatever the theme's called when they're they're just hanging out at the juice bar was used in almost every season. I think it would have made sense for Megaforce for them to have a Go-Go Power Rangers type theme and to have the homage background music, but for every season, especially Samurai being the first one, it made it feel very weird and not very Samurai-like to have all this MMPR stuff. Even though I'm actually kind of partial to the Samurai theme remix, I just think that that was a huge disappointment in trying to keep MMPR in there so much, and it really took away from it, and it was just so unmemorable. And I think it's a shame that we're getting seemingly the same composer stuff for Beast Morphers. I hope it either gets better or we move past that afterwards. Number 3 is going to kind of tie into what I was just saying, which is about MMPR moving into it, is number 3 is too much MMPR. I talked about in my top video how we did get a lot of cool merchandise, like a lot more merchandise than we were getting previously, but there was definitely an oversaturation of MMPR, and I get it, it's the most recognizable, it's the cash cow, but I think that Power Rangers is one of the worst franchises at simultaneously taking advantage of the nostalgia market while moving forward, whereas they just kind of prefer to stay in the past, you know. Speaking of, I like both of these merchandise things. I just put them up here because they're MMPR. This one not so much, but I just, you know, that's what I put here. Anyway, but there was just too much MMPR. Every single niche merchandise item was MMPR. It was everywhere. Anything they ever released, if there was any cool partnership with anybody, it was MMPR. And again, I get it, that would sell better, but I wish they would have pushed a little bit and been like, okay, here's a set of like 5 chibi collectible figures. Maybe let's make a 6 mystery one, Zeo Ranger 5 or something. Just push past that. And then trying to inject MMPR into the show with the theme and the music and the writing style. It's like they thought, hey, we want Gangbusters for MMPR Season 1, let's just do that again. That'll work in 2013 or 2012 or whenever Samurai debuted. And now it doesn't fit anymore. It doesn't work. And little stupid things like them including Go-Go for the morphing call. Go-Go Megaforce and Go-Go Samurai. What even was that? If they wanted to capitalize on the nostalgia, why not just use its morphin time? I don't mind that. If that was somehow a trade-off where they're like, hey, the show will at least be decent forever if they can just use its morphin time, I'm like, okay, that's fine. I like its morphin time just fine. But I don't understand why they put Go-Go in there. Like, well, Go-Go was in there and we were successful when it was Go-Go Power Rangers, so just put Go-Go in there. Sir, I don't think that'll make money. Go-Go! And it's just, that's so stupid to me. I don't know why they did that. And it was like one of the most obvious things about it. And so like both within the merchandise and within the show itself, trying too hard to make it like MMPR, I think really held it back. And I think the worst thing about that is that Power Rangers is still kind of viewed as this like for babies thing to a lot of people in this era in which nerd culture is pretty much mainstream. And I think it's unfortunate because us longtime fans have seen the franchise grow and seen its potential beyond MMPR. But most of the public has this mindset of MMPR was stupid, but also simultaneously the 90s were the best MMPR for life. And the way the franchise was, sort of right now in this era, validated those concerns. Where you'd be like, oh no man, they had some really cool stuff, and like the comic and like Time Force or whatever. And then they're like, well, and then maybe they're at home and they see, oh, Power Rangers is on. And they'll flip it to Ninja Steel and be like, oh no, this is just as bad as it ever was. It's like they looked away at the wrong time, and I think it kept the franchise very stagnant. And that was just, you know, very unfortunate. Speaking of, again, I didn't mean to segue these, but number 2 is, I'm trying to think how to word this, like a failure to grow the franchise more. And I don't want to make that seem like they didn't, because as I mentioned in my top video, they did expand the brand more, opened up more partnerships. We certainly grew a lot more merchandise-wise and exposure-wise than in the Disney era in many aspects. But with that MMPR bit and the way that they clung to certain things, I think they really held themselves back. I think the movie, if done right on many levels, could have been an excellent platform to expand the franchise. Like, as we saw with the Transformers movies, you know, regardless of how you feel about those, the 2007 movie put it back on the map in terms of the general public and expanded the fan base further. And I think that they missed opportunities to do that by sticking strictly to MMPR nostalgia when it came to the sort of older fans. And then with the show, it never seemed like they were interested in growing beyond the core demographic. And by that, I don't even necessarily mean catering to us older fans, but I mean slightly older kids. If you know, having grown up with it, I noticed that MMPR through like Wild Force or the Saban era production, the show did kind of grow, so that like as I aged, I was able to stick with it, you know, and it seemed like they knew that their audience was growing a little bit older, so you could watch it when you grew up a little bit. Obviously, a lot of people fell out of it as they got even older, but I think it grew a little bit to capture the attention of kids of all ages, whereas I feel this era with its writing and talking down to kids and humor was only interested, like you get like the 5 to 7 year olds or 5 to 8 year olds or whatever, and then instead of maybe making the next season a little bit more, you know, deeper and more mature a little bit, I don't mean darker, but just a little bit to capture slightly older kids' attention and letting it grow, so that way you're capturing the 5-year-old's attention and then he keeps the attention held as he grows up with it and keeps watching it. It seemed like they were only concerned with keeping the 5 to 7 year olds, then after that they don't care about them anymore, they're on to the next 5 to 7 year olds, and it made it feel very stagnant, and I think it prevented the growth because they could only stick with a certain audience for a certain time, and I think that they were very complacent with it. That's why the Hasbro announcement was such an awesome, amazing surprise, because I was prepared to serve out basically a long sentence of them just being okay with just doing this much, and I think that they had potential to grow it even bigger with some of the things they did, but it seemed, especially after a while, they were just content with only growing so much, and I think that's what I mean by that, because I don't want to make it sound like it was a total failure to expand the brand, because they did do good things, but I think they could have done so much more, and they got very complacent. Number one, the number one worst thing about this era, in my opinion, was the quality of the show and the show's writing. The show is like the center of the franchise. You know, we got stuff like the movie, the comics, the merch, all kinds of little stuff, but the show is like the central hub of the show, like the core of the franchise. And I think it's unfortunate that the writing has been so poor. As I mentioned, I don't want to repeat too many points from number two, but the way they talk down to kids, the humor, especially in this day and age, you know, a lot of people will argue stuff like, well, kids will watch dumb stuff like Teen Titans Go, but if you watch an episode of Teen Titans Go, there's a lot of funny jokes that would go over kids' heads. And in general, kids are smarter than we give them credit for, especially now where they have access to so much better entertainment. I always point to this example from years ago when I went to see BVS. There was a kid talking to his dad right before the movie started. I think he couldn't have been more than 8. And I was sitting next to my friend, and all of a sudden I'm just hearing this kid explaining Batman mythology to his dad in depth. And I'm just thinking about, see, the kids know more stuff than we give them credit for, and the show just talks down to them, and it's just, it's a poor reflection, I think, on the brand. Again, as I mentioned in 2, the brand has grown beyond that MMPR original mindset, but the show for the Neo Saban era, for the most part, there was some bright spots, but for the most part, felt like a regression. After we had watched the series more or less evolve from MMPR to RPM, it felt like we had been knocked back to starting positions, and then, like I said, when people would check out the show, they would think, oh, this never changed, it's just as bad as it ever was, and I think that was the worst thing about it. It prevented growth. It didn't make us fans happy. It made it, honestly, a chore. It felt like, after a while, it felt like we were serving a sentence. And I think that was the worst thing about it, because I think that was the least effort I felt was put into it in a way. I don't mean that, like, the actors and stuff, and there weren't people on the show working hard, but I mean in terms of, like, okay, they're trying to make comics, and they make all this cool merch, and all this other stuff, but the show just kind of stayed the same / a regression. And I think that was my least favorite thing to experience during this era, was the quality of the show. But anyway, that's about it for this one. Let me know what your guys' top 5, or just, you know, top any worst things were about this era, what you didn't like about it, you know, maybe what you're hoping they'll improve on. And thanks for watching, as always, and listening to me prattle on. But until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and of course, don't forget to climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications from my videos. Until next time, Dawson Ryder, signing out.